The phone rang just as I was locking my office door. It was late, past 9, and I almost didn't pick up. But something in me said I should. Hello? I answered, tired, expecting another routine call. A calm, professional voice came through. Good evening. This is the patent office. We're calling to inform you that your application has been approved. Congratulations, Mr. Malik. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The world around me froze. My thoughts turned into static. Approved? I felt my heartbeat in my ears. My mind was racing, replaying the last few weeks like a broken tape. Because just 3 weeks earlier, I found out that my brother, my own brother, had submitted the same idea. Word for word. Design for design. The idea that I had spent 2 years building from scratch. Remember gripping the phone so tightly, my hand started to shake. I forced myself to say something polite. Thank you, before the words left me in a daze. When I hung up, I just stood there in silence. The glow from my computer monitor filled the room, casting my shadow across the blueprints on my desk. My invention, our dream, was staring back at me. I should have felt proud. I should have been celebrating. But all I felt was betrayal. You know, people always say family is sacred. That no matter what happens, blood is thicker than water. I used to believe that until the day my brothers stole everything I built. I took a deep breath and sat down. My hands trembled as I picked up the old notebook where it all began. Sketches, notes, endless revisions. Each page was filled with late nights, coffee stains, and small victories. Every single one of them. Mine. I stared at the first page and whispered to myself, how did it come to this? The funny thing about betrayal is that it never hits you all at once. It starts small. With trust. With laughter. With words like, don't worry, I've got your back. And before you realize it, that same person, someone you'd give your last breath for, is the one who's pulling the ground from under you. That's what happened to me, just a few months ago. I thought my brother and I were on the same team. He was the one who encouraged me to chase this dream. He helped me design the pitch, look over the technical drawings, even proofread my emails. He watched me pour every ounce of energy into something that could finally change our lives. So, when I discovered that he'd filed my idea under his own name, I couldn't believe it. It felt like watching the house you built with your bare hands being set on fire, and the person holding the match is smiling at you. But that call from the patent office, it changed everything. It wasn't just a victory. It was a reminder. That truth, no matter how long it hides, eventually finds its way to the surface. Still, I couldn't celebrate. Because even though I'd won legally, emotionally, I'd lost something far bigger. Trust. And once that's gone, it doesn't matter how many papers say your name, or how many trophies sit on your shelf. The victory always feels hollow. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold. I could still hear my brother's voice in my head, his excitement when I first told him my idea. This could really make a difference, man. And it did. Just not the way I ever imagined. If someone had told me back then that this journey would lead to betrayal, I would have laughed. But here I was, holding proof that sometimes the people you trust the most can break you the hardest. I didn't know it yet. But that phone call was only the beginning of a story that would test everything I believed about family, loyalty, and justice. Because when betrayal knocks on your door, you only have 2 choices: let it define you, or rise above it. And I wasn't going to let it destroy me. When I think back to my childhood, I remember laughter before anything else. It was always me and my brother, 2 boys with scraped knees, wild dreams, and hearts full of ambition. We used to sit on the rooftop at night, staring at the stars, talking about how one day we'd build something big together. Something that would change our lives. He'd point at the brightest star and say, that one's ours. One day we'll reach it. And I'd believe him, because that's what brothers do. They believe in each other. We weren't born into wealth or opportunity. Everything we wanted, we had to imagine first. We'd build toy planes out of cardboard, pretend we were inventors, draw up business plans on torn pages of old notebooks. Mom used to smile and say, "You two are a storm of ideas." We were dreamers. Back then, I thought that was enough. As we grew older, life got louder, responsibilities piled up, but our bond, it always felt unbreakable. He was the one person I could talk to about anything. When I told him about my passion for technology and how I wanted to create something that could really make people's lives easier, he didn't laugh. He just said, "Do it. You've always been the one who sees things before the rest of us." He believed in me, or at least I thought he did. I still remember the night I first came up with the idea. It was 2 a.m., and I was sitting at my desk surrounded by coffee cups and sketches. Something just clicked: the design, the functionality, the purpose. It all came together like it was meant to be. The next morning, I ran straight to my brother's place, barely awake but too excited to care. I showed him everything. Every note, every drawing, every idea that had been bouncing inside my head for months. He listened carefully, nodding, smiling, asking questions. He even helped me brainstorm names for the project. I remember thinking, I couldn't do this without him. He was my biggest cheerleader. Or so I thought. Days turned into weeks. I poured my heart into building the prototype. My brother started coming around more often, offering to help with research, asking to see my progress, giving advice on how to present the concept. It felt good, having him involved. It reminded me of our childhood promises, two brothers chasing one dream. But looking back now, there were signs, little things I ignored. Sometimes he'd make jokes that didn't sound like jokes. "Man, you're so lucky," he'd say with a laugh. "You always end up in the right place at the right time." Or, if I had thought of this first, maybe things would finally go my way. I'd laugh it off. Because that's what you do when you trust someone. You don't see the envy hiding behind the smile. I didn't realize that what I saw as shared excitement was actually quiet competition. He started keeping notes of his own, asking to borrow my drafts, just to look over them. At the time, it felt harmless. Now I can see how blind I was. Still, I held on to hope. Because every time I doubted, he'd do something that made me believe again. A late-night pep talk. A cup of coffee dropped off at my desk, a simple text saying, "You're going to make it." I thought that meant we were going to make it. We used to dream about success as something we'd share. That someday, when things worked out, we'd stand side by side and say, "We did it." But sometimes, success doesn't bring people together. Sometimes, it shows you who was only standing next to you for the spotlight. If I had known then what was coming, the betrayal, the lies, the silence, I might have guarded my dream more carefully. But that's the thing about trust. You don't protect it until it's already been broken. Back then, I believed we were still those two boys on the rooftop, chasing stars together. I had no idea that one of us had already started planning how to take the sky for himself, the spark that started it all. It started with a single question. What if there was an easier way? That question kept me awake for nights. I wasn't trying to build an empire. I just wanted to solve a problem I'd seen my whole life. Small business owners struggling to manage their work. Losing time, losing clients, losing hope. So I came up with an idea for an app. Something simple, clean, and powerful. A platform that could help people manage their clients, track payments, and plan their growth, all in one place. I called it PulsePoint. It was more than a project. It was a dream. I remember the first night I started sketching out the interface. My desk was covered in notes, empty coffee mugs, and the quiet hum of my old laptop. It wasn't glamorous, just endless trial and error. But it was mine. Every small breakthrough felt like lightning. Every solved problem, a victory. And the best part? My brother was there for most of it. He'd stop by late at night, bringing snacks or energy drinks, sitting beside me as I worked. He'd say, "Man, you're really doing it. You're building something special." Those words kept me going. They made me believe that maybe this time I was finally close to something real. As the idea grew, so did the excitement. I started building prototypes, reaching out to early testers, researching investors. I'd stay up until sunrise some nights, staring at my screen, tweaking tiny details no one else would ever notice. And every morning, I'd call my brother to tell him about my progress. He listened to everything, the good, the bad, the frustrations, the breakthroughs. He even offered to help one day. He said, "You shouldn't be doing this alone. Let me help with the business side, the presentations, the investor pitch, the legal stuff." It sounded like a blessing. I trusted him completely. He started helping me prepare documents, organize spreadsheets, refine my pitch deck. He said he wanted to make sure it looked professional. I thought it was teamwork. Looking back now, it was data theft. At first, nothing seemed off. He'd come over, copy a few files to check them on his laptop, then email me revised versions. But slowly, small things started to feel off. One morning, I opened my folder and found that half my sketches were missing. Another day, my prototype file wouldn't open. The backup was corrupted. When I asked him about it, he just laughed. "Dude, you need better file organization. You probably misplaced it." He was calm. Too calm. And then there were the phone calls. He'd step outside to take them, whispering, saying things like, "Yeah, I've got everything ready." When I asked who it was, he'd say, "Just a friend." I didn't think much of it then. I was too focused, too eager to believe everything was fine. One night, though something didn't sit right, I came home from a late meeting and saw his car parked outside my apartment. He said he'd left something behind and came to pick it up, but when I walked in, he was sitting at my computer. The screen went black the moment I entered. He smiled awkwardly. "Just checking the deck. Wanted to make a few edits." My heart skipped a beat, but I brushed it off, because how could I doubt my own brother? I didn't realize it then, but those small cracks were the start of something much bigger, the kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt your heart. It changes how you see the world. At the time, I was still too hopeful, too naive to see it coming. I believed that when we finally launched, we'd stand side by side and say, "We did it." But that was the last time I ever saw him as my partner. From that point on, he wasn't just watching my success, he was quietly rewriting it under his name, and I didn't know it yet. But the storm was already forming, the betrayal I never saw coming. It happened on a Monday morning, the kind of morning that feels too calm, quiet, harmless, ordinary. I remember making coffee, checking my emails half asleep, and then freezing mid-zip. Right there, at the top of my inbox, was a message from the patent office. Subject line, "Patent submission received." For a second, I just stared at it, confused. My heart started pounding. Because I hadn't submitted anything yet, I opened the email, hands trembling. It listed the project name, PulsePoint. My project. My dream. Filed 3 weeks ago, but the name attached to it wasn't mine. It was my brother's. I felt the air leave my lungs. I reread it, hoping I was misunderstanding something. But there it was, black and white, official and final. My idea, my design, my system, filed under his name. I couldn't breathe, I remember whispering. It wasn't just my idea. It was my trust. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen. My mind was spinning, a mix of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. This couldn't be real. Not him, not my brother. The first thing I did was call him. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. By the time he finally showed up that evening, I had already gone through the documents, side by side, line by line. He hadn't even changed a thing. It was identical. Every sentence, every layout, every sketch. Mine. When he walked through the door, smiling like nothing had happened, something inside me broke. Why? I asked quietly. Why would you do this? He froze. Do what? Don't play dumb, I said. You filed the patent. My patent. Under your name. His face changed from confusion to guilt to defensiveness. Then he sighed, rubbing his temples. You're overreacting. It's not like that. I laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. It was the kind that comes out when words don't work anymore. Not like that. You took everything I worked for. We argued for hours. Voices raised, emotions raw. He said things I never thought I'd hear from him. I just wanted a chance too. He shouted, "You've always been the golden one. Everyone looks at you." I just wanted to prove I could make it. I stood there stunned. By stealing from me? He looked away. It's not stealing if we're family. That sentence hit harder than any slap ever could. By the time our parents got involved, the situation had spiraled. They sat us both down, desperate to mediate. Mom's hand shook as she held the documents. Dad's face went pale. My brother tried to twist it. It was a joint effort. We worked on it together. But when I showed them the timestamps, the notes, the emails, silence filled the room. Mom started to cry. Dad didn't say a word, and me? I just stood there, staring at the person I'd shared everything with, realizing I didn't know him anymore. There was nothing left to say. I grabbed my bag and walked out. As I stepped into the night, the air felt heavier than ever. I didn't look back. ICOULDN, single quotes D. Every step away from that house felt like a step away from the life I once knew, the one where family meant safety. Not betrayal. The city lights blurred as I walked. My chest burning with emotions I couldn't name. Anger, sadness, shame, loss. Kept asking myself the same question over and over. When did it all change? When did brotherhood turn into rivalry? That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, replaying every memory, every smile, every conversation, trying to find the exact moment when trust became weakness. But I couldn't find it, because betrayal doesn't announce itself. It hides behind kindness, behind laughter. Until it doesn't. I thought about calling him one last time. But what would I even say? There are no words for that kind of heartbreak. Instead, I made myself a promise, a quiet, cold one. If you wanted to play games with what I built, then I would play smarter. Not out of revenge, but out of respect for everything I had worked for. He took my idea. But he wasn't going to take my dignity, the road to justice. People say revenge is loud. But mine started in silence. After that night, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't even answer his calls. I just disappeared. Because when someone betrays you that deeply, the loudest response isn't anger, it's action. I spent the next morning sitting at my desk, staring at the empty space where my brother's name used to mean trust. Then I opened my laptop. If he wanted to play this as a game of ownership, I was going to play it by the rules, smarter, quieter, sharper. I made a list, every note, every file, every message I'd ever sent about PulsePoint, dates, timestamps, screenshots. I went through old chats, emails, even voice memos. Anything that showed when the idea was born and who built it. Piece by piece, I was rebuilding my story, not just to remember it, but to prove it. I remember whispering to myself, I'm not out to destroy him. I'm out to remind him who built this dream. And in that moment, something inside me changed. The pain turned into purpose. The heartbreak became fuel. Days passed like a blur. My brother was out there, posting about his new innovation, giving interviews, smiling in pictures. He looked proud, confident, like he had truly convinced himself that he deserved it. Each post felt like a punch to the chest. But I kept quiet, Because real justice doesn't come from shouting the truth. It comes from proving it. I started meeting with legal advisors, patent experts, friends of friends who knew people in the system. Every conversation opened my eyes a little more. I learned about how patent laws worked, how the timeline of creation mattered more than submission. If I could prove I had the original concept, I still had a chance. It wasn't easy. Some lawyers said, "You might as well let it go. Family cases get messy." But one advisor, a quiet man with gray hair and kind eyes, looked at me and said, "If you're right, the truth will stand. Just don't lose your calm." So that's what I did. Night after night I worked in silence. No phone calls, no messages, just files, documents, and the constant sound of my own determination. I created a timeline, the first draft, the first design, the first version I sent to him. Everything had a date. Everything had proof. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was justice, steady, patient, and precise. Weeks passed. He grew louder. I grew quieter. He started showing up at events, bragging about his new app. Mutual friends congratulated him. Even our parents didn't know what to believe anymore. It hurt, but I smiled through it. Because I knew something he didn't. The truth was already catching up. One night, as I sat reviewing my paperwork, I came across a small, forgotten notebook. Inside were early sketches of PulsePoint, written in pencil, dated and signed, a full year before he ever got involved. That notebook felt like a lifeline. I held it in my hands, whispering, "This is it. This is how I take it back." The next morning, I walked into the patent office. The air felt heavy but right. I handed them my file, page after page of proof, timestamps, and original drafts. The officer looked through everything carefully. When she finally nodded, saying, "We'll review this thoroughly," I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the first real step toward it. Every time I left that building, I felt a little lighter. Every step closer to the patent office felt like a step toward justice, quiet, earned, inevitable. My brother was out there enjoying his borrowed glory. I was here, reclaiming mine in silence, and though no one knew it yet, the storm he started was about to come full circle, because truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs time, the call that ended his triumph. The call came on a quiet morning. I remember the sunlight slipping through my curtains, the smell of coffee in the air, and the faint hum of the city outside. It was so ordinary, until my phone rang. "Good morning, Mr. Malik. This is the patent office." For a moment, I froze. Those words, that voice, it was like déjà vu. My heart started to race. Then the officer said the words that would change everything. "After reviewing your documentation and evidence, we've confirmed that your application was the first legitimate submission. Congratulations, your patent has been approved." I didn't say anything at first. It felt unreal, like the world had stopped spinning. The officer continued, calm and professional. "As for the other application, it's been voided. It contained duplicated material from your files. We've officially closed the case." I sat there in silence. My hands trembled as I held the phone. The weight of months, maybe years, finally lifting off my chest. I should have felt victorious. Triumphant, even. But all I felt was hollow. Because yes, I'd won. But at what cost? I stared at the blueprints on my desk, the same ones my brother had once helped me draw. The same dream that started with laughter and late-night brainstorming had now ended in silence and court documents. I'd won. But why did it feel like I lost something greater? I whispered. A few days later he showed up. I hadn't seen him since that night. He didn't knock. He just walked in, his expression cold, his voice sharp. "So, it's official," he said. "You got what you wanted." I looked at him. I didn't want this. He laughed bitterly. "Really? You didn't want to see me humiliated? You didn't want everyone turning their backs on me?" I stood up, trying to stay calm. You turned them against yourself. His eyes narrowed. You think you're so perfect. You think you're better than me. I never wanted to be better, I said softly. I just wanted to be brothers. For a moment, the room went quiet. Then he stepped closer, his voice breaking, a mix of anger and shame. You exposed me. You ruined everything. I shook my head. No, you did that when you chose greed over family. He didn't say a word after that. He just stared at me, eyes full of something I couldn't describe. Not hate, not regret. Maybe both. Then he turned around and walked out. The door shut behind him, and I knew it wasn't just the sound of wood closing. It was the sound of an entire chapter ending. After he left, I sat back down, staring at the patent certificate that now carried my name. It should have felt like justice. And it was. But justice can feel lonely when it comes too late. I thought about calling him, about saying something, anything, to bridge the gap. But I didn't single quotes because sometimes silence is the only thing left when words have lost their meaning. That evening, I took a walk. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and the breeze felt softer than it had in months. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not happiness, not pride, just peace. The truth had finally spoken for itself. No revenge, no shouting, no drama, just quiet justice. And even though it broke something between us, it also reminded me of who I was. I wasn't the person who needed to steal to succeed. I was the person who built something worth fighting for, the right way. I looked up at the night sky, remembering those childhood nights on the rooftop. Back then, we used to point at the stars and say, one day, we'll reach it. I reached it. But I reached it alone. And that's when I realized sometimes victory isn't about winning. It's about surviving the betrayal without becoming like the betrayer. Aftermath, silence between brothers. Success has a strange sound. It's quiet. It doesn't come with applause or fireworks. Sometimes it arrives in silence, when no one's around to celebrate it with you. That's how it was for me. After the patent was approved, everything changed. PulsePoint began to grow faster than I ever imagined. Investors called. Partnerships formed. My inbox filled with congratulations. I should have been overjoyed. But every time my phone buzzed with good news, there was one name that never appeared: my brother's. Months passed, and the distance between us grew wider. He stopped coming around completely. No calls, no texts. Not even a single message on my birthday. At family gatherings, he'd stay quiet, sitting at the far end of the table, eyes down, avoiding me like a stranger. The air between us was thick with everything unsaid. Mom tried to keep things normal, forcing smiles, pretending we were still the same family. But the silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I used to glance across the table, hoping for a look, even a small one, that said, "We'll be okay." But he never looked back. One night, after a company launch event, I came home to an empty apartment. There were flowers, awards, even a framed article calling me the mind behind PulsePoint. But none of it felt real. Because the one person I wanted to call, the person who had been part of this dream from the very beginning, wasn't there anymore. I remember sitting on the couch, staring at the success I thought would heal me, and realizing it hadn't. The win felt hollow. Success without peace is just another kind of loss. I used to replay our memories like old film reels, the rooftop talks, the inside jokes, the late-night brainstorming sessions. We used to finish each other's sentences. Now we couldn't finish a conversation. Sometimes, I caught myself almost texting him when something exciting happened, a new deal, a milestone, even a funny moment at work. My fingers would hover over the screen, then stop, because what would I even say? "Hey, remember that thing you tried to steal? It's doing great." No, some words are better left UNSENT. At family dinners, Mom would ask quietly, "Have you two talked yet?" I'd shake my head, forcing a smile. Maybe soon. But deep down I knew, soon had already come and gone. Dad tried to mediate once. He said, "You're both stubborn, but you're still brothers." I wanted to believe that. But some cracks can't be glued back together. He wasn't just my brother. He was my first best friend. And losing that hurt more than losing the idea ever could have. One evening, I was driving home when I passed by the old park we used to hang out in as kids. I pulled over and sat there for a while, watching the swings move with the wind. It felt like they were moving to a rhythm only the past could hear. For the first time in a long while, I let myself cry. Not out of anger. Not even sadness, just acceptance. You can fight for justice. You can protect your dreams. But you can't always protect your heart. The company grew. The name Pulse Point became something bigger than I ever imagined. But every success carried a shadow, a reminder of what it cost. I used to think revenge would make me feel better. But justice isn't about feeling better. It's about setting things right, even when it breaks you a little in the process. Sometimes people ask me what I learned from it all. And I tell them this: you can rebuild your career. You can recover your idea. But once trust is gone, the silence it leaves behind becomes permanent. That's the price of betrayal. Not the fight. Not the loss. The quiet that comes after. I still hope, deep down, that one day he'll knock on my door again. Maybe not to apologize, but just to talk, the way we used to. Until then, I keep moving forward. Because forgiveness, like healing, takes time, and maybe, just maybe, some wounds are meant to remind us not of pain, but of strength. The lesson I'll never forget. They say time heals everything. I used to think that was just something people said to make themselves feel better. But now I understand. Time doesn't erase the pain. It just teaches you how to live with it. It's been a few years since everything happened. The business grew beyond anything I ever dreamed of. Pulse Point became a name people respected. Something that actually helped others, just like I always wanted. But behind every success story, there's a chapter that never gets told, the quiet one. The one filled with lessons written in invisible ink. Mine was about betrayal and forgiveness. There are days when I still think about him. I'll be in a meeting, hearing people praise my work, and suddenly I'll remember the nights we stayed up planning it together. The way he used to look at me when I talked about the future, proud, hopeful, almost like he believed in me more than I believed in myself. And then I'll remember how that look turned into something else. Jealousy, distance, silence. It took me a long time to stop asking why. Why he did it. Why he couldn't just be happy for me. Why family, of all people, can hurt you the most. But somewhere along the way, I realized some questions don't need answers. They just need peace. One evening I was sitting on my balcony, watching the city lights fade into the horizon. That's when the words came to me, simple but true. If betrayal teaches you anything, it's that blood may make you related, but loyalty makes you family. And loyalty, I learned, isn't something you're born into. It's something you earn, something you choose, again and again. I used to think forgiveness was weakness. That if I forgave him, it meant I was letting him win. But forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the weight they left behind. I didn't forgive him right away. In fact, I resisted it. Because holding on to anger felt easier than facing the emptiness that followed. But one day, I realized that every time I thought about what he did, it stole a little more of my peace. And I'd already given him enough. So I let go. Not for him. For me, I never got an apology. Maybe I never will. And that's okay, because I've learned that closure doesn't always come from words. Sometimes it comes from understanding. Sometimes it comes from standing on the other side of your pain and realizing you survived it. If you've ever been betrayed, you know how heavy that wound can feel. It makes you question everyone, even yourself. It makes you build walls around your heart. But don't let betrayal turn you bitter. Let it turn you wise, because the moment you choose wisdom over anger, peace over pride, that's when you truly win. Last week, I went for an early morning walk. The city was still asleep, the streets quiet. As the sun started to rise, the sky turned from dark blue to gold dot, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since before all of this began: lightness. Justice felt good, but forgiveness felt freeing. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching the sunlight spill across the rooftops. And I smiled, because maybe that's what life is, a collection of storms and sunrises. And every betrayal, every heartbreak, every fall, only leads you closer to who you're meant to become. I don't know if my brother will ever call again. But if he does, I won't answer with anger. I'll answer with peace. Because at the end of the day, revenge fades. Justice settles. But forgiveness stays. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is the one you miss the most. But when you do, that's when you finally set yourself free. Betrayal cuts deep, but forgiveness sets you free. Subscribe for more true stories of revenge, justice, and redemption.